What if the most dangerous thing your immune system can find is not a germ, but a familiar piece of you? Why can a system built to protect the body end up damaging joints, skin, intestines, the thyroid, the pancreas, or the nerves? Instead of one confused switch, the answer is a chain of checkpoints that normally stop a dangerous cell before it can do much harm. Imagine following one immune cell through those checkpoints, from its training ground to the moment its brakes either hold or fail. The first surprise is that variety comes before certainty. That sounds like a simple design failure, a defense system that cannot tell friend from foe. But the stranger truth is that your immune system is not built from a clean list of enemies and allies. It is built to recognize patterns quickly, from incomplete evidence, while a real infection is multiplying. That speed is useful. It is also the reason the system needs several brakes, layered on top of one another. The first brake is installed before an immune cell ever leaves its training ground. T cells mature in the thymus. Each one carries a different receptor generated by shuffling genetic parts. That randomness is the source of enormous variety. Somewhere in the crowd, there may be a cell able to recognize a new virus. But the same process creates cells that can recognize pieces of the body's own proteins. So the thymus runs a dangerous audition. Developing T cells are shown samples of self. Cells that react too strongly are usually deleted. Some cells are diverted into a special regulatory role instead. The ones that survive leave with a rough education in what not to attack. It is not perfect. The thymus cannot display every molecule in every tissue, and some self-proteins appear only during particular stages of life or injury. A few self-reactive cells therefore reach the circulation. That is not automatically a disease. Outside the thymus, immune cells also need permission to switch from recognition to attack. They look for context, signs of infection, tissue damage, and signals from other immune cells. Without those extra signals, a self-reactive cell can remain quiet, become unresponsive, or be suppressed. The suppressors include regulatory T cells. Think of them less as a single off switch and more as a permanent inspection team. They restrain other T cells, influence antigen-presenting cells, and help keep inflammation from becoming self-sustaining. There is a reason biology pays this cost. A response that is too timid can let an infection spread through the body. A response that is too slow can lose the only window in which a virus or bacterium is vulnerable. Natural selection therefore favors a system with a wide alarm range, fast expansion, and several ways to recognize danger. It does not favor a system that is mathematically certain about every target. Certainty would be too expensive when the evidence arrives late and the pathogen is changing. The survival bargain is simple to state. Make enough immune cells to recognize almost anything, then use training and context to prevent most of them from firing at home. The hidden cost appears when the brakes fail, or when the surroundings create an unusual combination of signals. An infection can damage tissue and release molecules that were normally hidden. Inflammation can increase the display of self-proteins and provide the co-signals that turn recognition into action. Some microbial fragments resemble parts of our own proteins closely enough to confuse the response. And inherited differences can make a person's tolerance system more or less forgiving. None of those routes is a universal explanation for every autoimmune disease. Autoimmunity is not one illness with one trigger. It is a family of failures involving genes, tissues, infections, hormones, and the timing of immune signals. That is why the phrase "the immune system attacks the body" is accurate but incomplete. The system usually does not wake up with a conscious target labeled self. It detects a pattern, receives activating context, expands its forces, and only later do we recognize that the pattern belonged to us. Consider 3 different modern examples. In type 1 diabetes, immune activity destroys insulin-producing beta cells in the pancreas. In rheumatoid arthritis, inflammation targets structures around joints and keeps calling in more immune cells. In multiple sclerosis, immune damage is directed at the insulating myelin around nerves. The organs and symptoms differ, but the broad problem is shared. Recognition, activation, and restraint have fallen out of alignment. Even the brakes have named parts. FOX3 is a transcription factor required for the development and function of many regulatory T cells. CTLA4 and PD1 are inhibitory checkpoints that help limit activation. These names are not a list of magic buttons, and changing one pathway can affect useful immunity as well as harmful inflammation. They are clues that tolerance is an active process, maintained every minute rather than granted once at birth. This also explains why a self-reactive cell is not the same thing as an autoimmune disease. Receptor generation is random enough to create possibilities. The surrounding tissue decides whether those possibilities become dangerous. A cell can be present, see a familiar molecule, and still fail to receive the second signal that would make it multiply. The arrangement is closer to a city with checkpoints than a fortress with one wall. The thymus checks new recruits. Peripheral tissues control access. Regulatory cells interrupt escalation. Inhibitory signals make attack harder to sustain. Damage control systems clear the debris that could otherwise keep the alarm ringing. When the system works, these layers are almost invisible. When one layer is weakened, another often compensates. Disease becomes more likely when several small changes line up: a susceptible immune repertoire, a damaged barrier, an infection, a hormonal shift, or a failure to resolve inflammation. That multi-step picture is less dramatic than saying that the body suddenly turns against itself, but it is closer to the evidence. Your body is therefore protected by a machine that must make two opposite decisions at once. It must be suspicious enough to catch an unfamiliar threat, and restrained enough to tolerate the familiar world it is made from. Most of the time, the layered breaks win. You never notice the self-reactive cells that were deleted, silenced, or held in check. When they do not, the cost is not evidence that immunity is badly designed in the ordinary sense. It is the bill for deeper compromise, a system optimized to survive uncertainty, forced to distinguish an enemy from the material of its own home. Today, that compromise is written into the symptoms of autoimmune disease, even though the original survival problem belonged to a very different world.